But and then we added more to it. And that was the other thing about Benny was like, well, how can we build this? How can we grow it? How can we get more people involved? And I'm like, this is working pretty good. And he's like, yeah, but we got to make it bigger. Like, and that was always Benny was, we got to make it bigger. And I'm like, man, like, but be happy with where we are right now. Sometimes, too much rapid expansion, we're going to lose, we're going to get tired, or we're going to get frustrated, and I think Benny really appreciated that element of like my kind of like checks and balances where I'm like, hey, whoa, like let's dial it back a little bit. He's like, I appreciate your caution. Now let's throw it to the wind.
This week's episode is brought to you by our friends at Manage Comics. Are you tired of outdated, clunky software running your shop? Manage Comics is the modern solution for comic store owners who want a smarter, easier way to manage their shop. It's built on Shopify, the world's #1 e-commerce platform. With an integrated POS system, Manage Comics saves you time and makes more money by giving customers the power to manage their own subscriptions. Upgrade to a simpler system that works for you, not against you. And I'm going to go off script in here and say, I love Manage Comics. There are other solutions out there that are also really good, but there's a reason that we're so close to Brian Garside and work with him and his team. Manage Comics is a really wonderful tool for any comic shop owner. You should join their next webinar and see the difference for yourself. Visit managecomics.com/webinar today. And make sure you told them that we sent you.
Hi, this is Adam Freeman, and you are watching and or listening to Comic Industry Insiders, a weekly podcast where it is my pleasure to get to know the people behind the scenes of the comic book industry, to get to know their lives, their careers, get to know the tips and tricks that you can bring to your business or career in comics. And this week we're talking to somebody who I love seeing every time I see Sal Crivelli's face at a show. It just warms me. He's just such a delightful presence. His love of comics is so obvious in everything that he does. He and his partner Tiffany are perhaps the cutest people you've ever seen in your life. I mean, they just are just fucking adorable. Anyway, I rarely get into this kind of thing into an intro, but it's hard not to, because not only is Sal such a delight, and not only does he love comics, but he has launched and has continued to run Comic Pop, which is a fantastic channel that if you are not subscribed to, you are absolutely missing out on. One of the pioneers in comics commentary, in comics background, in criticism. Like everything that you love about comics and more, it happens over at Comic Pop. Friends and neighbors, Sal Crivelli. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, yeah, I'm great, especially after that intro. I really appreciate it. Thanks, man.
I wasn't kidding. Y'all just have such a wonderful spirit to you. You just are such a delight. I don't know. It's and it's obvious looking at your background here. You man, you love some comics.
Yeah. Got a monument to junk that I've accumulated over a vast career.
What I know you're gonna have an answer for this. What's the last comic you read and loved?
Oh man, I mean, probably the most recent issue of Batman Dark Patterns. I read comics on the regular, and so I am constantly besieged by fantastic books that are coming out on a regular, bi-monthly basis. Just so many books out there that right now that I'm enjoying. So many books that have come over the last couple of years that I love, and are some of the greatest, like some incredible works that I'm just like, yeah, this is going to be remembered, and I'm just happy to be here for it. And I'm very lucky. Some of us old timers are very lucky to have been around during spans where it's like people refer to this stuff, and I'm like, I remember buying that. Like I remember getting that fresh and having a fresh take with no other commentary. Not the seminal stuff. Like I don't remember Dark Knight Returns or Watchmen or anything, but.
Are you old enough? I mean, how old were you in 1985?
I was a baby.
Okay.
I was not reading.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fair. Those of us who have been around long enough to have been there. I mean, I wasn't working in comics in '85, but I definitely was into comics, and I can tell you that it has been wonderful to be on the ground, right?
Oh yeah,
Just watching this thing that I love become the theme of popular culture.
it's true, and I knew that it would come one day. Not that I like had a date in mind, but I remember when it hove into my field of vision, I was like, this is an unstoppable force. You know, there were so many different influences pop culture wise that stemmed directly from comics, and within my lifetime, you know, I mean, just using Ninja Turtles as an example, you know, comes not just from, oh, Marvel / DC told so and so we need a such and such that's going to help boost it. No, a couple of schmoes from the Northeast are like, I love Daredevil. I need to draw. I have a story and a song in my heart, and here it is. To the media empire that it's become, it's just it's because they loved comics that thing exists, and springboarded a whole generation of black and white indie comics, and just that in general is just a you know, rags to riches story that proves that comics are the wellspring from which our collective love of colorful pop culture action adventure stuff is really derived.
Truly, and I think and it's actually, when you look at it, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles not only is that like that seminal point that begins the black and white boom, right, of the late 80s, where, you know, in many ways starting the IP fire that comes out of comics. It's not just about Batman Biff Boom Pow, right?
Right.
You could argue that it really truly is the thing that began it, but also the fact that it has been so generationally adopted, right?
Yeah.
Every new generation has a Turtles that they latch onto that becomes theirs.
Yep. That's right. That's right.
I think one of the things that it actually brings to mind is some commentary I got from a local retailer who was talking about how this quarter was one of the best quarters of sales they've had in a long time for single issues. And I'm hearing this a lot, right? There's a big theme going on right now that comic shops are really doing well because of the Ultimate Comics line, and because the Absolute Comics line, and the Energon universe from Skybound. Those are the big drivers, right? And one of the things that this retailer said to me that really stuck out was that he said that we're seeing subscriptions from high schoolers for the first time in a long time. And it's because they finally have their own version, right? They have their Batman, right? And, you know, each generation gets that moment of, because I had that, right? I remember having my Batman.
Oh, sure.
And each generation has their own Turtles, as it were. So let's go back then. Let's talk about Baby Sal. How does this lifelong love affair begin? Because you know, very few of us think I'm gonna grow up and do some ancillary thing that's not make comics about. You know, I'm gonna make something about comics that's not comics. Like it's always fascinating to me how we get there, and it's part of the reason why we have this show.
That's fair. Yeah, I'm also fascinated by that concept. And, you know, looking back on the history of where I am now and where I was planning to go, or where I wanted to go, or where I could imagine myself when I was in the position in that gestation period, I was like, you know, like many of us, the story is not a direct path, and it is, you know, just ripe with failure. And, you know, I know that would be, if one were to write an article about me in some kind of a spin anti-way, which there's no point, you know, people who try to like ape off us or steal or, you know, just use us for some kind of publicity are wasting they're barking up the wrong tree. This ain't the place for that. It doesn't work for you.
None of us are celebrity enough to help.
Exactly. The comic pop train is not a powerful locomotive. It only gets itself across the track. You cannot hitch yourself to it. I'm sorry. But if they were, they could say something like, "Oh, you know, Sal does YouTube because he failed at everything else," and it's like, isn't that the answer to everything? I mean, isn't that how you get to the college you picked, or the, you know, trade school you went to, or the vocation you're in? I mean, you know, God help you if you like actually actively chose to become, you know, like a state comptroller, but. You know, when I wanted to get into the arts, I remember just like gravitating towards these colorful images across the page. When I was a kid, my first comics, I was actually just asked about this today, came from the grocery store, where I got a copy of a spectacular Spider-Man book. And that was like, I had access to comics when I was a kid, and because my parents were like, well, he's a child, so obviously he'll read comic books, throw that in front of him. That's cheap and easy. And but my first like chosen comic book was from a grocery store, and it was a Spider-Man book. It was a spectacular Spider-Man book, actually. But
Do you remember the issue?
I don't remember the number issue, but it was the issue. It was part 2 of the issue where Spider-Man fights Puma. It's by Jerry Conway and Sal Buscema. Completely not your normal Spider-Man book. You know, like Mary Jane is dealing with a dude who's trying to bed her, and Spider-Man is in Arizona or wherever fighting the Puma on some kind of a spiritual quest journey. Like, it's not a high-flying, urban-based New Yorker adventure where he's catching purse snatchers. Like, Thomas Fireheart had just relinquished control of the Daily Bugle. Like, there's a lot going on in that issue where it's like, what is this? And it means something very strongly to me. Like, there's a great little story about Peter Parker as a kid, and so every time that anybody tells a story about Peter Parker as a kid, I'm like, make sure to add that, and they never do. They never read this issue. It's just it's a great story, and it's like you could tell Conway just like there was no like, well, obviously because of who Peter Parker is. Now, it may have been a story from reality, but in practicality, it's just an analog for Peter being hot and tired and fighting an animal. Anyway, so I read a comic
in the
book.
desert. You can't swing anywhere in the desert.
Yeah, no, he uses his webs in one effective manner. He makes a noose and catches Puma by the neck, and then he's like, "Nah, I'm not going to kill him," because the whole fight is to the death. They both agreed on it ahead of time, so you know, don't get too upset about it. But yeah, it's a visceral, really crazy book. Anyway, I read a comic book in a grocery store, and I was like, this is mine. I need to do this from now on. I got into drawing, and I suck at it, so I got out of that. And I was like, well, you know, the writer has the real power. They get to tell the artist what to do, which is not how comic books work, folks.
Nope.
I know that's a misapprehension. People are like, well, the writer's king. That's why from like 2002 to 2013, they put the writer first. And it's like, well, you know, from 1987 to 1999, they put the artist first. Because it's all about balances. But anyway, I was very into telling stories, and I was into theater, and I watched a lot of TV. And so I fancied myself a storyteller, and I was very good at like spinning yarns in public with my friends, and I wrote down all these stories, and that got me on the path to writing. And my parents were like, he's a writer. Let's foster that. And so I got into that in high school, and by that point I'd kind of fallen away from comic books, or rather comic books had pulled away from me. So I took a break, which I think is important. Like, I think if you love something desperately, there needs to be a point where you broke up with it, and comics will always give you an opportunity to do that.
There's always a jumping off point.
There's always a jumping off point where you're like, I think this ride is over, and then something will happen. And that's the thing, like, that is always my answer to whenever people go like, why are the 80s or the 70s or the 60s better than any other period in comics? And I'm like, well, every period has the best stuff you've ever read.
Yeah.
So anyway,
every period has the periods before it to inform it.
Exactly.
Right? And also every period has all the periods before it to judge against. So you're always going to find the best and the worst, right?
Precisely.
There is no best and worst.
Yeah, and every generation spawns equally talented people. It's not like talent dried up sometime in 1992. But yeah, so I got into movies as a result of my kind of like abandonment of comic books, and I got way into film and concepts of screenwriting, and I carried that with me into college. Thankfully, I didn't go to film school because that would have been a big waste of my time. No offense to film advocates out there.
No. Please.
I didn't get into film, and it would not have served me well.
I'm sure if you're a film student and you're watching this, you're exactly where you need to be.
Precisely.
And all of those student loans are going to be just a cinch to pay off. You're doing good work.
Yeah, there's no way you should have taken any of that money and just made a movie with it. And of course, you shouldn't, because I actually did that. Like, when I was in college, I did make a movie with the money that I would have spent on like that. Yeah, and it blows. And
what is it? I need to see it.
You can't find it. It's not anywhere. It's not like it was pre like streaming.
Yeah.
So I couldn't even sell the thing. The only time it was ever publicly viewed was one time we had a screener, and it was just a big open failure in front of everyone that I knew. from birth until that point, and I was like, wow, everyone got to see me fall on my face. This is spectacular. And they all came, like the people traveled across state lines to see this. But I made a movie, and it sucks. And like, listen, it has nothing to do with like the actors all did an amazing job for zero money. And I'm so proud of them, and they're giving their all, because they're like, they live in a post-Clerks world. Like, anyone could just get picked up from something. So I'm in. And even though the movie is 62 minutes long, and the aspect ratio is like not widescreen, and there's virtually no good lighting in it, and there's breaks
the sound
in
is atrocious.
The sound is the only good part about it, because we actually had a sound guy. So,
nice.
Yeah, the sound is great when there isn't a break in between lines, because I needed to have like, a background track, which I did get. Ricardo knew what he was doing. But,
you just didn't use it.
No, I mean, like, I thought I was using it, and then I, because you need to learn the rules. The trick that, like, you must know, and we're getting ahead of ourselves, but the reality is, in any vocation, in any artistic field, you must learn the rules to break them. And you have to know something. And with movies, especially if you're the director, you need to know all of it. You need to know what lenses you need, what cameras you need, what lighting, sound, editing, programs. I ripped a Avid program off of my school computer and just used this like broken half shareware version of Avid to cut the movie together, and it took like, I don't know, like 3 months, and it just and I made the best movie I could.
You made a movie though, dude. You made a movie. You know how many
technically
student productions I've been part of where nothing ever gets cut together, nothing ever gets shown. Like, those of us who like storytelling and like visual storytelling, we've all been involved in those things, and you learn a lot, right? Just from being there. The energy of being on a set is the juice, right? It's not necessarily the product.
No, definitely.
It's legitimately that experience, but you actually got it done. I think that says a lot. Well, all right.
I appreciate it.
We don't need to dig deep into it, but I do want to know what's it called?
It's called Diner Coffee.
Diner Coffee. It's a very emotive thing. Like it definitely takes me immediately back. So wonderful.
Yeah, you could see all the influences and every bit of lack of originality I have going for me. But I needed to know like shot composition. I needed storyboards and all that stuff. And I had like shots in my head, but not a written down thing. Just a waste. And the script isn't very good, but it's written by a kid who doesn't know anything and has no life experience. So what do you want?
Dude, no, don't downplay that. I'm not gonna allow you to downplay this anymore. You made a movie, and I think that's wonderful, and you should celebrate that. And
thank you. But it was a complete and utter failure, and I tried that, and I did that. But regardless, I learned that I wanted to make movies and stuff, and I had such a miserable experience making that. Wonderful experience with the actors. Everything else was a nightmare. But I had done that. I graduated college. I was checking out YouTube, and I was interested in what they were doing. Just the concept of it in general. And I made like a live journal story about like a zombie attack on our dorm. I was always making something. And then comics were a natural step where I had this concept for a cartoon series. And we pitched it to every network that exists, and all of them but one said no. And then they got a new showrunner, and he was like, I'm taking everything out and throwing it away. And I was like, you know what? Industry doesn't have this level of like complications. The comic book industry. And I had actually just gotten back into comics at that time. So I was like, hey, I'm loving these comics. The comics are better than ever. I'm loving what's going on in here. I have a direct line to the industry. I was emailing Joe Quesada directly because he just let his email address be out there. I'm sure it's not this email address anymore. But like we were just back and forth, and I'm like, so these guys are readily available, which makes me think maybe the fence to jump over to get into this industry is a little lower than the other ones. So I adapted my show into a comic book series, found an artist from the Joe Kubert School, and we got to work, whipped up a first issue. I got that out there. And when I say out there, I mean I went to church basements and had stacks of them and sold them to absolutely no one and brought them to people at New York Comic Con for the first time. New York Comic Con opened up for the first time, and so I went there and brought my books and saw a copy strewn on the floor. Whenever New York Comic Con started, 2006.
Okay.
And so I had my copies out there, and I'm pounding pavement, giving away copies of this book that cost me anywhere between $3 and $4 a piece. And then that went nowhere. And I was like, but I loved it. And the experience of making them, I was like, this is so exciting. And it was so like addictive. I wanted to make more. And it's just that same feeling of like wanting to create, which you can see how I sidestepped into YouTube, because like it's a similar prospect where it's you're making something and then you get to see the fruits of your effort like on display. It takes a little longer with the comics because you got to send your pages out. And
Sure.
But once you get those pages, man, like you're seeing this image you had in your eye, and like the artist, your collaborator, came up with new ideas that they presented and made it even better than it could have been. Amazing stuff. And that's happening at the exact same time that I am watching other YouTubers like making a name for themselves and creating their own videos. And I'm like, this is really interesting. And I was already interested in making movies because I had made a movie and I had edited, and I made my own copy of The Phantom Menace that's a little shorter. I was like, I can fix this movie. That's how I learned how to edit. I was like, I can fix
the Phantom Menace.
Yeah, just with editing. I was like, I don't need special effects. I just need like the DVD and the Avid. And I made a cut that was stomachable. It's not great, and it's amateurly put together. There's a lot of transitions, but like,
what's the biggest piece you took out?
I cut a lot of the Viceroy.
Okay.
And
listen,
and the
man,
Gungans,
if we've learned
imagine.
anything, it's that politics and tariffs can change the world.
Yeah,
he was way ahead of that.
Yeah, either George Lucas is a prophet or politics got really stupid. I don't know which one it is. Maybe it's both. Dave Filoni would tell you, he'd put on his cowboy hat and be like, it's both. But,
that's exactly right.
That's exactly right. So I married those two concepts, and I was making videos on YouTube, and I was like, oh man, I'll do movie reviews. And so I started doing that. Around the same time, a couple of guys in Milwaukee were making videos about Star Trek, and I was completely unaware of what the Red Letter Media Star Wars Phantom Menace review was going to do to film criticism and YouTube in general. But I'm making my little videos, and I'm mostly aping off of like Phil DeFranco. And so I'm making those, and it's fun. I'm like, I got like 210 views. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
But I noticed that the comic book reviews that I was doing instead of movie reviews were so much higher. Like more people were watching them, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm already reading them. I might as well review them.
Sure.
So I started making more of those, and then I had always wanted to have like a podcasting empire, even if the podcast didn't exist at the time. Like I was sitting around with my friends in high school with like a little camera, and like we were just making shows and movies and reviews and like just actual like honest to God YouTube videos pre-YouTube,
right?
Where we're just making what we thought was like Wayne's Worldian kind of public access content. And who'd have thought that like Wayne's World is actually a pretty good template for what you should be doing or at least what you could have been doing in like 2012.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, if you had done, if Wayne's World had started in 2012 on YouTube, it'd probably be outperforming the movie Wayne's World at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, that movie is perfection though. I do love Wayne's World.
It is a really wonderful movie.
But yeah, man,
and it's got a pool table.
And it's got a pool table. But so yeah, I'm that's where I was, and that's where it came from. But it was a lot of just like meandering and sidestepping and finding out what I was really good at versus what I was kind of okay at or what I wanted to be good at, and then it became this thing. Which again, like I feel silly being like, and then it became what it is, and what it is a channel with like 100,000 subscribers, which like Uber driver once felt bad for me for saying. He's like, well, you'll get there someday. I'm like, well, it's been 10 years that I've been trying to make this happen. And I mean, like, I pay my bills with it, and I hang out with my friends every week. Like, I'm living, the good life, so to speak.
You truly.
And it really doesn't matter. Like, truth be told, like the channel subscriber stuff doesn't matter anymore. Like it used to matter, but only because Hollywood is like, oh, look at those numbers. They're not looking deeper than just the superficial, which is how you get movies like Cowboys and Aliens. Oh, it's sold out. I'm like, yeah, there's 100 copies. Like, come on. It didn't sell out. He sold it to himself.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Is that I think I saw a quote I saw an interview recently where Jimmy Donaldson, Mr. Beast, was talking about how the subscriber count now is just bullshit.
It is,
right? Yeah, it's just complete. It's vanity. It's ego.
It is. It is ego. It's complete ego. You're right.
And it's really about views, right? It's about engagement, and it's about how long people are sticking around. It's about are they watching? Are they clicking? But they're not necessarily subscribing. Although if you're watching this and you haven't liked and subscribed to Comic Industry Insiders, what's wrong with you? All right. But like that piece of where it's so algorithmically based. All of our entertainment is so algorithmically based. It's about engagement, right? And we talk about politics. Politics has become about engagement. It's become about what is it going to get people talking.
Yeah.
Right. It's sad, but it's the truth. It's just the nature of the world that we live in. And the ones who win are the ones who get people talking and arguing, even when they're saying that you're an idiot.
Right.
They're
still talking about you.
You know,
which is actually kind of just the old adage, which is there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Truly.
There is, but it depends on what kind.
Yeah.
But if you are living in a period like we are where shame doesn't exist anymore, then we're back to no bad publicity. Like you could have bad publicity. Like you could be accused of the most heinous crimes and you could be, the highest office in the land. Who knows? So there's a lot of options. That's what I'm saying.
So there are a couple people in your life that I want to talk about. We mentioned, I think before the show, we were talking about your partner, Tiffany.
Yes.
Who is just a ray of sunshine. And the number of people, I have to say, the number of times that I have been in rooms where, you and Tiffany are there, and then you guys leave the room and they go, how did that happen?
Yeah.
How did that happen? How did that guy end up with, no offense, Mint, man.
None taken. Absolutely. That's what my parents said at my wedding.
Wow.
No, they didn't.
No bad publicity, except when your parents are wondering why you're getting married.
Yeah. No. Yeah. How? I mean, is that the question? Is how did that happen?
How does that? So, I mean, she is. I understand she has a career outside of what you guys do.
Yes.
But also, she is so involved in the channel. I mean, it's really the two of you are the faces of that channel. How does that relationship get started? And then I'd love to get into how does that relationship work on the day-to-day?
Yeah, interesting question. The it happens because without her, I don't do any of this. I would have been spending money, hand over fist, making comic books that no one buys, and I would have been making these little vlogs. But she's the one who was like, "Your strength is in the interactions." Like I thought that the only way I can get through this whole barrier was scripting. So I wrote these reviews and I was like, we need to get these things in front of me. Like I can't just speak off the cuff. Like that is evident. And that's because I took a public speaking class in college. Going back in high school, I held court and talked all the time, told stories like this, no problem. And I was in the theater program, and that explains everything. But in college, I took a public speaking class, and I was like, this is easy as hell. Like, come on, how could you not? And the trick was you had to film yourself and then give criticism. And I watched about 10.5 seconds of the video that I made of my presentation on God knows what.
Yeah.
And it was so horribly embarrassing. I just completely receded into myself, and it really shattered any confidence I had about public speaking in general to the exact opposite. And there was no good feedback from the professor. They were like, "Oh, sometimes happens," and I'm like,
"Sometimes
genius."
Happens. Thanks, man.
Yeah. So I avoided that entirely, but I liked writing and I liked giving criticism and discussion. And so I wrote these scripts, and I was like, I need to get like a teleprompter. That'll help. And so I bought this special equipment for my cameras and stuff. And it was never as good as if I just spoke from the heart. The writing was from the heart too, but it was also like carefully crafted and had like clever wordplay and stuff. And it's just a total waste of time. A lot of effort for nothing. And Tiffany recognized that right away when we were, developing this whole thing. And I was explaining for like the umpteenth time some critical element of Spider-Man's history to my two layman friends, Ben and Ethan, who don't read comics. And she was like, "This is the show," and then because we had a camera and all our crap from all these other things we were doing. She just sat it down, filmed us, and that was the beginning of it. Like, that was how it started. It was the show virtually hasn't changed in 11 years. But without her, that show doesn't exist, and then my job doesn't exist. Like, because it would have just been me, like, just hitting my head against the wall, like Raging Bull, just like, come on, why isn't it working? So
if I just write this just a little better, and if I get if I don't let my eyes track while I'm reading the teleprompter,
or if I ape off some other YouTuber, if I create some other thing, I mean, and I'm constantly trying to reinvent what we're doing, but that's just because I can't like stop. But
well, there's a difference though between refinement of something that is working and just being doggedly, stuck on something that isn't, right?
Exactly. And there's a really important distinction between those two things. And if you tell me what they are, let me know. But I definitely also am like, I am doggedly persistent, and that has resulted in a lot of spoils of war, so to speak, including my amazing wife. That's not true, actually. I did not have to like beg, borrow, and steal to get that situation. It was just the way I explain it, and I've changed my story over the years because the idea of meeting someone online has changed. Like, the perception and the stigma has changed over the years. But when we first met, it was still kind of like, really? And I didn't want to deal with that. I just wanted to not hear it. So we came up with a story about how she's a mutual friend of ours. Like, she went to a school that was attended by a friend of a friend, and so we just said that we met through them. But no, I plugged in all the things I wanted in a person, and her picture came up, and I was like, oh. So then I just sent her a message being like, "You're the person that I like most need in my life." I didn't say that specifically. You don't want to say that. That's a little extreme. But
that's not your opening line.
No, it's not. I mean, it shouldn't be really. It
on
really
Bumble,
rarely works.
if you're on Bumble right now, don't do that.
Well, and that's the thing. This is pre Tinder and Bumble and stuff like that. Folk aren't on those apps for this. This is
are
in the infancy. Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah,
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, you did it once, and I
did it once, and it was pre those apps. When those apps showed up, I'm like, oh, thank God that I circumvented that, because I did not want to. I can't even imagine. A friend of mine had been on the apps, and I was like, oh, how's it go? He's like, experience, but like, I hate this. I hate everything about it, and it's horrible, and I never want to do it again. And I'm like, cool, that's what I hear. But anyway, so I typed in everything I needed, and I and her picture came up, and I sent her a message, and I was like, hi. And she, out of the like thousands of messages I'm sure she received, responded, and she lived around the corner. And so we met at a Starbucks, as cliche as that sounds, and talked for like 7 hours, and then couldn't, get enough of each other. And so we made plans for the next day, and then the next day after that. And then before you knew it, we were dating, and then before long we were like exclusive. I waited a long time to get married, and I guess it's just because like it's a scary idea, and I was never quite financially stable enough where my brain was like, you have every right to be married. Like, I was just kind of like, I'm not there, and I should be. Like, if I'm gonna marry this person, I need to give her like a house and a car and like a life. And I'm like not in that position.
To you this house.
I'm making videos on the internet, and I'm not making money hand over fist here, and I have no right to do that. But then at some point I just realized it was like I should have married her like, years before that, just because it was like obvious. It was the best decision I ever made. And so I made that decision, and we made that decision. I asked her, and she agreed and acquiesced.
Yeah.
And so made that happen, and we've been married since 2017. It's been an amazing time. But the way to maintain it is just to have mutual respect, but most importantly, communication. Communication is the most important thing. I'm terrible at it, so I am always constantly learning more and more about how best to communicate. And but her endless patience also helps in a big way.
So the answer to the question is that just Tiffany brings everything, and that you're there.
As you can imagine, I mean, like she just got a fantastic. I hesitate to call it a promotion, but it's more like a new opportunity at her current job, and everybody, from what I understand it, like everybody's just giving her they're so happy for her because she's made such a name for herself where she works, and they're like so supportive and understanding and kind, and she's like I didn't know, like I didn't know people cared, and I'm like, well, that's the effect you have, is that like you are a sweet and intelligent and funny and insightful person who is also a problem solver. Like, you are not just awesome and fun to be with, but you're also incredibly versatile and useful. Like, you know how to solve issues that people are besieged by and don't have the mental bandwidth to figure out. And so, that's a lethal combination. That's a thing that makes you indispensable. And
100%.
And so you'll find that everywhere. It's wherever she goes, she's like, and she doesn't believe that necessarily, but it's true. And and the evidence is all around us. But yeah,
well, let's get back to so you when you originally started Comic Pop, it was TV Little House. Now, Little House was your publishing imprint, right?
Yeah, Little House was the publishing imprint. I lived in a little house, and so whenever we would say, "Oh, we should go somewhere," we'd go, "Let's go to the Little House." And so when I was making production stuff, like when we were doing like sketch comedy and crap, I was like, well, we're Little House Productions. We'll call it that. And that was like stupid and short-sighted and didn't work out. But also, Little House was not available on YouTube's like custom URL. So I went with TV Little House because that was what a number of outlets were doing at the time, and putting TV in front of their name or after the name, because TV is synonymous with YouTube. Which, of course, it was not back in the day, and YouTube, of course, was quietly, desperately jealous of TV.
Yeah.
But, so we went with that name, which is just a boondoggle. Big mistake on my part, because I was just like, I was hyper aware of how hard it was to gain followers and to grow, and so any amount of traction we made was like gold to me, and I was so covetous of it that I couldn't see the forest for the trees. And I'd made, connections and like relationships with folks like Rob from Comics Explained, Betty from Comicstorian, and they were like, "You got to change your name. It's a terrible name. It doesn't make any sense. It's hard to look for. The search algorithm sucks." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know all these things, but we have like 10,000 subscribers, and I don't know what else. Like, I can't throw that away because I don't know what else to do." And,
how hard is it? I mean, you know how hard it was to get 10,000 subscribers. The idea of going through that again.
Yeah. If I start over again, we'll never get back, which is completely wrong. And I should have absolutely started, like, when I was working with those guys and they first floated the idea of changing the name, I should have immediately done that.
Right.
And I just didn't. And I regret that. That's a huge regret of mine, is not completely abandoning TV Little House immediately, to the point where it's still the URL here, because we changed it. It's youtube.com/comicpop on YouTube if you like use the custom URL, but like the actual honest to God like search for it, like in the code, is still TV Little House. And it's just and I'm sure it hurt me, because if you looked for us, you'd look for Little House and you'd find Little House in the Prairie Clips. That was all you'd find. And it wasn't even like it was a hop, skip, and a jump to us.
Laura, trying to figure out.
I was just like, what the hell is all this? Like, it took forever to get to us. So we changed the name, and that was a fun experience, like coming up with the name, because we were like, all right, fine, we're going to change the name. When we hit 10,000 subs, we'll change the name, or something like that. I remember I think we had already hit 10,000 or something like that. But we had a whole meeting about it, and we were passing around ideas, which are still inside jokes today. Like, Ethan, for whatever reason, just really loved the idea of like an action verb. We were like, we got to put comic in the name. And that was one of the brilliant suggestions from Benny and Rob, where they were like, got to put comic in the name because the people are searching for comics. You got to get that search algorithm.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, comic. And I really wanted Comic Source, and somebody else had it. And they had like very small numbers, but it was like, I can't take. And we were, and my friend Ethan's like, what about Comic Attack? And back then, nobody had Comic Attack. We're like, it sounds a little aggressive. He's like, what about Comic Assault? Like, just constantly throwing out these names that just were.
That sounds a little. That's more aggressive.
A little more aggressive than Attack, honestly.
What about Comic Rape? How about that?
These are the jokes that we were like throwing at each other, where it's like, well, why don't we just go the full 9? By the way, all but the R one have been taken. Like, I've looked them up.
Yeah.
I have a piece of paper that I may have, I don't remember if I've ever scanned it and shown it to the patrons, but like, I have it. There's somewhere in my house or on my hard drive. There's like a scanned picture of like all the names we came up with. Comic Attack is on there, but virtually every name we came up with that didn't have a following back then or didn't have didn't exist, someone took it. Because every year, like, I look over my shoulder at like new channels. I'm just like getting kind of crowded.
Yeah.
But so we went with Comic Pop because my friend who's in the video game industry just went, you should call it Comic Pop, and then he just disappeared. Like, he bombed it on the conversation, was like, call it Comic Pop, and then left. And we were like, that's it.
And it's interesting. People talk about naming. How do you name things? And I mean, for me, Prana is such a strange company name for somebody who works inside of comic books, right? Because it's a yoga term, it's Sanskrit. There's no reason to call it your comics thing Prana. And I had people saying it should be like a pull box or these kinds of things. And these were people who really legitimately understood marketing. Yeah. Perhaps I should have listened to them. However, I got 2 pieces of advice. One was you should always name your company something that will keep you up late at night working. Which this definitely has. And the other is when the guy who said it to me, he said the whole thing. He said Prana Direct Market Solutions. It's like, that's it. I just heard it. I just knew it. It was just, I mean, granted, I'm sure Benny would have told me you're an idiot. You should go back to pull box.
Yes. Yeah. Like, the benefits of having known Benny for a decade is hearing him in the back of your mind, especially now that he's gone, that's so invaluable, is hearing him like in the back of my head, just being like, nope.
Let's deal with it. Actually, this is a good place to jump in. So Benny Potter, very big character in your life and in mine. I think he was. I still miss the guy. Yeah. We're completely. Spoilers, Benny's no longer with us, but tell us about Benny Potter and how you met and what kind of role he played in your life.
I first met Benny through Rob, I believe, of Comics Explained. Rob had DM'd me through what is now long gone, but YouTube messaging. YouTube had an internal messaging feature that no one used. And I owe and also hate for 2 examples. The first one, Rob DMs me on YouTube, says, we're doing a podcast, me and Comic Story, and you need to join us. And it really did feel like an invitation to be part of the weekly poll immediately. Like, to be like, join the show and be a member of it. But what I found out later was it was more of an audition process. They were like, you should come on the show and like hang out with us and see if you're a good fit.
See if it fits.
But if you check the language, it really felt like Rob was just like, just be a member of the channel, which he very probably did say, because Rob was very much like, oh, we'll have fans like be members of the show. And then he quickly was like, that is not a good idea. The other message I got on YouTube messaging, which I never saw again, was Marvel was starting a YouTube channel and they wanted me to host it.
Okay.
And I had a whole offer in YouTube messaging. So I never saw it.
So Marvel uses YouTube messaging to bring you an official offer. They don't go through email.
Send me an offer for a job that paid money in Manhattan. And I just never saw it. And then I saw it, like, I want to say I was just like absently checking it in like March or April. They'd sent it in February. And I get back to them. I'm like, hey, I'm sorry. No one on earth uses this function. You may be surprised to learn that there are probably hundreds of unseen messages like these. Is that offer still on the table? And they're like, no, it isn't. And I'm like, of course it isn't. So, you know, that worked out great.
If you really want to ruin someone's life, you know, drop them like the biggest offer ever, you know.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a free Spanish villa.
Yeah.
You know,
But
just for showing up.
Yeah.
And but put it into YouTube messaging.
Right. Which is gone. YouTube has deleted the function. It's gone forever. But yeah, so I was brought in on the weekly poll. I bombed in on that, and I immediately just stole the show. And I don't mean like I was better than everybody else. I just mean like I took it. I was like, I'm on this show now. And I don't know. I was not that I wasn't impressed with them. They were much bigger, but we were all kind of growing at the same time. They weren't what they had become yet. And the way the format of the show worked, there was like way too much time devoted to describing, you know, you'd say, okay, who would win in a fight, Nightwing or Daredevil? And you'd come up with some reasons, and there'll be a fun debate. You know, this was a show where they were like, describe the fight. Like, so Daredevil is going to throw his billy club. Like it's a D&D session, but they didn't play D&D. And I was like, I am not doing that. Like, I was like, I don't know, I guess Daredevil uses radar sense to catch the billy club and throw it back. And like, whoa, we can't throw it back. And I'm like, because now it's my turn to come out. I'm like, this is horrible. Have you
doing some sort of exquisite corpse where they're like fan describing a scene?
It's really weird. I was just like, I'm not comfortable with this. And we threw it to the fans, and they were like, stop doing this. And so it eventually became a podcast, which you would listen to.
Yeah,
and,
right.
But my like flippant attitude towards both Benny and Rob, at the very least, endeared me to Benny. Rob and I are friends as well, but Benny was like, this guy doesn't care who I am. I like that.
This is a good spot to like break off of your narrative with Benny and to talk about who Benny was.
Oh, yeah.
Because Comicstorian, if you look him up on YouTube, is still like that channel is still killing.
Yep, biggest YouTube channel about comic books.
That's 100%. And so who is Benny, and how does that happen?
Benny Potter is a kid from Rhode Island who ends up who has an entrepreneurial spirit because he gets involved in selling illicit substances. And then, now, he said the story many times. I am not telling tales out of school here.
Okay.
He has told the story.
I've never heard this story. Benny was a drug dealer?
I'd be very hesitant to call him a drug dealer. But let's just say that he made things available to people for a price. And he... to elude...
Not exactly how you would describe a drug dealer. I appreciate it.
Well, and I wouldn't call them drugs. I mean, you know, we're not talking about, you know, any of the hard substances here. But
okay, that's fine.
And to elude capture, he quickly... You know what? Let's start over. I gotta say, let's cut this one. I'll start over. Because I don't know, because I'm like, he has definitely said this shit on mic.
You know what? It would be fun to do is one of a Comicstorian style video just about Benny.
Yeah.
It'd be fun to produce that, right?
Yeah,
just do his whole narrative.
Yeah. That'd be great.
All right. Let's co-produce that. We'll make that happen.
Yeah, we're in. I'm in. Let's do it. Benny's a kid from Rhode Island. He has a couple of brothers, and he decides to join the military, and he ends up in like extreme firefights, and ends up. There's actually like a book written about his commanding officer and the shit that they had to do, and they don't use real names, but he's in it. And, you know, just went through a really, really harrowing ordeal in Iraq. And during that time, he had two things he did and loved. Playing video games online and reading comic books. And one of them the video games brought him his wife, and the other one brought him his career. Like,
There you
he
go.
went to hell and found the two greatest loves of his life while there. It's an amazing story. Comes back, ends up marrying his lovely and talented wife Natalie, and then getting a job, I believe, at GameStop. And he had a little bit of spending money because he had been injured while in their employ, and they were negligent, and so he got like kind of checks as a result, which allowed him to kind of like be experimental with his money. I don't want to say that he like invested a lot, but he was able to take risks and try things. And so he ended up making a YouTube channel, and he was doing like lore videos about video games and stuff like that. And he was kind of like using that idea of like lore videos and applied that to comic books, and thus Comic Story was born. Comic Story was one of a couple of ideas he had. He had a brand called Eligible Monster, which was his video game brand. Or his video gaming brand. And so Benny ended up, doing that alongside it, and the comic one just outpaced everything else he was doing.
Yeah.
And he's like, I know a good deal when I see one. And so he just doubled down on the comic arm and just went to work, making his videos and doing voiceovers and dramatic readings. And it just eventually snowballed into what it became. And we all kind of are owed our success, his much more than me, of course, to the Marvel Cinematic Universe and just like people's searching for this stuff.
Right.
I wish that those movies translated into comic sales, but what they absolutely directly resulted in was YouTube searches.
Sure. 100%.
Yeah. So, Benny and Rob just benefited entirely thanks to just this influx of new audiences that were looking for, lore, for lack of a better term, about these characters. And so that helped to skyrocket Benny to where he was. He was also he formed a like an MCN, like a multi-channel network called NC4 TV, I think. And that was kind of like there were a lot of different MCNs back then that they facilitated deals for comic book or for YouTube channels, and worked directly with YouTube to get advertisers, and they split the revenue share and stuff like that. And Benny helped to pioneer that and parlayed that into other avenues of business. And that's the thing about Benny, is that he was always working. Like he had a very entrepreneurial spirit, and he like all he needed was like a break. Like all he needed was like a little bit of like seed money and some time, and he was off. And he never stopped from there.
Truly.
Like the second he got like his footing, he just ran for it. And there's so much about Benny that I could say, and I don't want to like necessarily get off the subject, but like once he had his footing, once he had his what he would call a business, the first thing he wanted to do was employ his friends. Like the first thing he wanted to do was get everyone taken care of. That meant his wife, that meant Dan, that meant everybody that he knew and loved, get them in. And I remember just vividly, towards the more recent span of his career, one of the crowning achievements was getting his brother involved in the business. He was like, I got Andy. Like, that was a big deal for him. And he just very, very I don't want to reuse entrepreneurial again, but he was really like driven.
It really was. And I can tell you that my I don't have nearly the relationship with him that you did, but there was a time when I was seeing him a lot, and I value that time just incredibly. He was so inspiring. His energy was just, and that energy was not just about running a business, which I know plenty of entrepreneurs, and they're just driven to succeed. That same energy he brought when he talked about comics, Like,
Yeah.
and when you talk to him privately about, say, Batman, right? You be in a bar, and I will in like San Diego, and you sitting around talking comics, and I'll tell you, there are plenty of people I know in publishing and distribution, and even creators, that when you start talking, when the conversation turns to Batman lore, or who's in the Justice League and who should be in the Justice League, they just shut down.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm 100% guilty of this. That I'm not as invested in that part of the lore and that part of the narrative that I once was. But man, you mention what's going on in Batman comics, and fucking Benny would light up, and he will light up the whole room. He will have you really caring and like pulling out your phone and ordering stuff, like to be home when you get there.
Yeah.
He was incredible.
Yeah.
It was amazing to watch.
Yeah. He ended up really being a great ambassador to the hobby, and he was a good friend. He really did have like a sense of loyalty that like you want in a person who is as successful as he is. I don't mean that to say that like he facilitated, good times and lots of free flowing alcohol and stuff. I mean, like,
which
you'd want him. I mean, that was also an option. That was also inherent. But like, it was more. It was actually. I rarely, if ever, tried to avail myself of Benny's like situation. It was just like, if Benny wanted to do something or go someplace, he was like, all right, and you're going to. And I'm like, all right, I'll see what I can do. He's like, no, I got that. But he, some folk who are successful, like they're like, about time. And they take that as an opportunity to, look down on you, or to be, superior, and to find another bracket of people that they want to be with. And that was not him. That was Benny always wanted to bring up people that he loved where he was. Like, he was like, so I'm going to climb the mountain, and then I'm going to throw a rope. Like, that was Benny.
Yeah.
And he was like that constantly. And part of it was because he just couldn't turn it off. Like, he just couldn't stop thinking. Folk, colleagues, friends who were working in, smaller brackets like myself, he was like, all right, here's what you got to do. Here's an idea. Here's what you should be doing.
Yep. And giving away ideas. Like, that was one of the things he was always doing. This is something I can't do anything with it. You go do it. I can tell you that my the reason that I'm doing this now is partially those times with Benny where we were talking about it. And I said, I want to do this thing, and I don't necessarily know what it looks like. I love the comics industry, and I want to talk to the mechanics of the comics industry. And he goes like, well, you're not going to get an audience. I'm like, I get that. And in the end, I think the piece that he didn't get was that I have a business that this feeds, right? So I don't need, even 10,000 people. I just need the right 200 people, and we've gotten there, right?
Right, but Benny would say like, well, why wouldn't you want like 10,000? Like, what?
Exactly.
Like, what's so bad about having more?
Right.
Like, sure, we could get like enough cheese for the party, but like we could get like a whole wheel of cheese. And it's like, well, but then we have a lot of cheese. And he's like, you're saying that like it's a problem, like.
Whoever complained about too much cheese?
Yeah. I'm not saying that Benny was a cheese-loving lunatic, but like, the cheese, the metaphor people. But yeah, he that was Benny to a T, man. He just and
every conversation, every dinner with him, all of it was like that. It was just like, this is big. It was such a big personality, and he lit up a room, and he would, and every fan interaction I saw with him was never like a. It was always almost this gratitude for the fan that stopped him, right? Even if he's like we were at a dinner. I remember once we were at having steaks one night, and he like the fan came up to the table, and anybody else could have really gotten annoyed at the fact that he's on a rant, and this kid came up, and he immediately pivots, and it was just this gratitude about this kid who was a fan of his. I don't know, special human. So
yeah.
Anyway, so tell me about then the relationship business wise. How did your relationship with Benny grow Comic Pop, and how did that interaction go?
Well, Benny, he gave me advice and he gave me suggestions, and mostly it was because of my affiliation with the Weekly Pull, the podcast that he had launched with Rob and that I just ingratiated myself into. But quickly it became this thing, and it was bigger than I thought it was, like that I ever thought it was. I was very surprised recently in like taking inventory of its effect and how much I owe to that show, which was just me dicking around with two other morons. And but it really meant a lot to people, that kind of banter and dichotomy, like it was, or camaraderie I should say, the three of us. But and then we added more to it, and that was the other thing about Benny, was like, well, how can we build this, how can we grow it, how can we get more people involved? And I'm like, this is working pretty good. And he's like, yeah, but we got to make it bigger. Like, and that was always Benny, was, we got to make it bigger. And I'm like, man, like, but be happy with where we are right now. Sometimes, too much rapid expansion, we're going to lose, we're going to get tired, or we're going to get frustrated, and I think Benny really appreciated that element of like my kind of like checks and balances, where I'm like, hey, whoa, like let's dial it back a little bit. He's like, I appreciate your caution. Now let's throw it to the wind. But it was really the weekly poll that got us there. I remember, I mean, one of the highlights I think of his career, certainly mine, was our New York Comic Con panel, where we had like standing room only. And, I feel like I hate retelling that story, and I really won't. I'm just going to say that happened. But like, it sounds like I'm reliving my glory days, but like, it was just such a wonderful experience. And it's such a humbling experience that like, there are people who are just like, like the people, they've thanks to Brandon Yinnis, who was Benny's producer and facilitator, he helped like set up the whole thing through Reed and got us the biggest room. And we like were sitting at the thing, at the mics, and they didn't let anybody in, and they moved the crowd so that we couldn't see them. So when we first walk in, no one came. That was the visual. Yeah. And we were like, right, yeah, this tracks. Yeah.
This is what I expected.
This is horribly embarrassing. I can't wait to make light of it on the show. Here we go. And then they were like, oh, can we let everybody in? And we were like, what do you mean? And that like really, that was a moment where Benny's like, holy crap. Like, this is like not almost like a you like me, you really like me kind of moment. Which was great to see. Working with Benny was fun and also challenging, and it was always challenging in the same way. It was never like, oh, I found a new way that Benny is driving me crazy, but it was like Benny would he'd be like, well, we're gonna do this thing, and I'm like, but like maybe we could just not. Like I'm already working my ass off here. Like maybe we could just like take it easy for a minute, And it was like when the weekly poll ended, he was like, well, what are we doing next? And I'm like, how about nothing? We finally did it. Like we made this thing and it worked out, and it didn't work. And, and it ended. And, now let's just focus on our own rice bowls. And he's like, yeah, that's a really good idea. That makes sense. And then he was immediately cooking up another thing. Yeah. And he was like, let's do it. We'll cook up absolutely. And I'm like, all right. That was another one where he was like, what are we going to call it? We're going to call it Comics Tonight. He had all these names. And I was like, we'll call it Absolute Comics. And he's like, no, I love it. And immediately that was it. It was like J. Jonah Jameson, but like if J. Jonah Jameson also like could kick your ass. Like he was just...
If J. Jonah Jameson had an incredibly well manicured
or whatever
beard,
you want to call it, yeah.
Oh, that beard was majestic. Yeah. It was royal. It was royal. The beard of a royalty. It was like
Leonidas.
Yes, exactly.
And he knew it. Like he was like, I'm almost got like the Gerard Butler beard, and I'm like, yeah, it's looking good.
Good.
Yeah. He always like, and he loved, yeah. So I owe a lot to that. That was a huge thing. And I'd hear like, you imagine people and friends you make and like business colleagues you have, like just all those categories. Like I have my two friends that I do the show with, Ethan and Ben. Sometimes I don't see one of them or the other one because they have scheduling conflicts or whatever, but I realistically see them no less than once a week for the last like 11 years, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
And but like and sometimes the show is like 4 hours because we'll just catch up. Benny was the only person outside of my wife that I spoke to more times in a week than anyone else for 10 years. Like I talked to Benny every day or at least 3 times a week, every week for 10 years. And he's such a jackass. We would have these moments where, like, he'd be like surprised at like vulnerability or being or just direct honesty, and that was always very sobering for him. Like, I genuinely believe that he liked me because I would never kiss his ass.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think he'd cotton to that. I think he'd be like, well, yeah. And not that I was rude to him. That's the difference. Like, it's not like he liked me because I negged him into submission. It was like, no, like I was just like, yeah, well, Benny, I don't think that's a good idea. Or like, yeah, well, you know why you did that. Like, because you're a jackass. And he's like, yeah, I owe him a lot. And I wish I could have, like, in any way, like, paid it forward, but he virtually never accepted it. Like, there were some times where, like, I would pay for lunch or something, and he'd always go like, oh, like, he'd be like, oh, thanks. And you could tell he appreciated it. Like, he appreciated the gesture, because he was always paying for lunch and dinner for everybody. So every once in a while, like, I remember the last time I saw him was C2E2, and I met him at his hotel. We were staying at the hotel. We were in the same hotel. So sometimes we weren't. So I just remembered. I'm like, I met him at his hotel because we were staying in the same place.
Yeah.
We were having lunch, and like we did a buffet, which like neither of us availed ourselves of a full buffet experience. We like had one plate, and we were like, all right, we're done. But we had lunch, and I grabbed the tab. He was like, he didn't do that like fake, like, oh, you didn't have to do that. He was just like, oh, all right, like. Like, almost offended, but like this kind of like respect. It was just, yeah, it's one of those unspoken things, because you knew him. Like that was a fun time, because like we're at the, I don't know what the hell it's called anymore. It was the hotel in Chicago.
The McCormick?
They shot The Fugitive.
Oh.
And I was like, this is the hotel they shot The Fugitive in. And he's like, what are you going on? Like, what do you care? And I'm like, this is the room. Like, we could go to the. And I ran up to the area where Richard Kimball's like, he falsified his research. He's yelling at Dr. Charles Nichols about Provasic, and I'm like, this is the room. They're doing a quinceanera, but this is the area. And Betty's like, all right, well, I'm gonna leave now. He was also like clearly deeply distrustful of like self-owned restaurants. Like, he only liked chains. And I don't mean he was distrustful. It's more like he was, well, what are we gonna do? Like, one time we were in, I want to say it was San Diego, but we're walking the streets, and he can't find a Starbucks. And Tiffany's like, well, I actually found this amazing coffee place around the corner. We'll go there. And he's like, but what will we get? Like, he didn't know what to do. He's like, I know what to get at the Starbucks. I don't know what to get here. She's like, they have the same things. Like, you don't get some insane order. You have coffee. They have that. If you tell them the same thing. Plus, they have a whole
menu. You just read the menu, and you pick something. And then they just make it for you.
Yeah, he was the dude who, like, when I first started going out to Colorado to see him, I'd be like, where are we going to dinner? He's like, oh, it's a great place. You're going to love it. It's like Applebee's. If it wasn't Applebee's, he'd be like, well, I mean, we do well enough. We don't have to go to Applebee's. We can go to, like, this place. And I'm like, but it's still a chain. I have that here. Like, I'm like, let's go to, like, a cool local steak place. He's like, why? It's just funny. But he loved that option. When we go to cities, he'd be like, oh, we'll go to Ruth's Chris, because that's a steak place that I know that has a name. Or we'll go here.
I've been to more than one Ruth's Chris with Benny. Yes.
I've never been to a Ruth's Chris outside of context with Benny. I actually impressed my uncle once. I was talking about it. I referred to Ruth's Chris as a steakhouse, and he's like, you are the only one I know who says Ruth's Chris. That's what it's really called. Everyone else says Ruth Chris. It's Ruth's Chris.
Wow.
And I'm like, yeah, I've eaten there a bunch of times. I know.
I know it well. Yeah. I guess I always said that.
You said it right.
Your uncle gets maybe he doesn't get out much.
He doesn't go to Ruth's Chris. No, he goes
guess
to
not.
he goes to Peter Luger.
He's never hung out with Benny.
No, he would love it though. I
Ah.
would have loved Benny because he's such a
Oh,
naturally curious person. He would have been like, he would have just asked him questions the whole time. He would have exhausted
Yeah.
Benny. Benny would have been like, why is this guy asking me so many questions?
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that.
Sure.
I know that he was very special for me, and I know how special
Yes.
he was for you. And I think that there should be much more conversation about who Benny Potter was, because we all really have missed out on a real bright spot since
Agreed.
he left. So
I just applied for a memorial panel at New York Comic Con for him. Hopefully.
oh,
So, Reed, if you're listening,
we'll see it.
I think it's a good idea.
Christine, I don't know if you're hearing this. I'm invoking.
Right?
You gotta listen to this one, Benny
And
Potter.
I got people, Rob,
that'd be
Husson,
awesome.
me, maybe not me.
100%.
I'll be there, but that's not the drawing force. The real
You
draw.
can
is that,
moderate. You can moderate.
Yeah, his brother's is down. There's we're gonna get as many people as we can to come
I
up
love
and
the sound
talk
of
about
that.
it. I'll have a little I'll probably cut together a little montage. The whole thing.
I love that a lot. That's wonderful. All right, so I want to talk about something we do on this show. We've for the past few weeks and a few weeks more coming. We've been talking about something that I talked about as the death of journalism.
Oh yes,
this idea that comics journalism at a time during the period that you and I have both been employed in the comics industry, there was a period where comics journalism was the PR machine of comics. If you were a publisher and you wanted to put something out, all you really need to do is have a relationship with reporters, relationships with venues. You do an exclusive, you do an interview, you do the cycle, right?
right.
You'd have a news cycle. If you did it really well, you'd have it to yourself. And if not, you're competing and everybody's getting more traffic, and it's wonderful.
Yep.
Everybody is advertising. Then at some point, it dies.
Now, is it dead? And if so, what killed it?
Exactly. This is my question. This is
I see.
why we're having this conversation, because
I'm sure folks like Heidi McDonald would disagree. What do you mean it's
honestly,
dead?
I had her on and we talked about this, and I think she agreed, but she's like, it's like not quite dead. It's like
Right.
she's got it hooked up to life support, right?
Okay.
She's the dialysis machine that's keeping its kidneys functioning.
Fair.
But it's still, it feels like the power that it had is gone.
Oh,
right.
Yes. Oh, yeah. The wind is out of the sails. There's no juice in comics journalism.
Right. So here's one of the reasons why I want to have you on was because you're one of the people that I know and has successfully filled in the gap that what was created when those venues started, sucking air. When is there a point where you see that shift? Or is there a point maybe where you see the shift towards where that attention came towards people like you? Is that intentional? I know that at some point you wrote for CBR.
Yes.
And so
thank you. You did your research.
Try.
Yeah, I did write for CBR for a little while. I would hardly call what I wrote for CBR as journalism, but I did write articles. They were editorials, really. I was more of an editorial.
I'll admit to having run out of time and not looked up any of them,
it's okay.
So you'll have to fill in that gap for me. But
I wasn't writing hard hitting interviews and deep analyses of the industry, but I was being like, hey, Batman's selling a lot of books. We should probably pay attention to that, But yeah,
if
they
you
should probably do
paid
another
for
crossover at
500
some point.
words on how Batman is selling a lot of books, that's journalism.
I mean,
for it.
The fact that you call me in any way, there was a moment where I was actually on a panel for comics journalism.
Yeah.
At one of the Comic Cons, I don't remember which one it was.
Sure, there's plenty of them. They
And
all
you could
blend together.
Feel the resentment of me being up there, myself included.
Sure.
Because I was like, I am not and I'm not a journalist. It's like calling Jon Stewart a journalist. And by the way, he is.
Yeah.
But he didn't want to be. He's an MTV report. He's an MTV talking head.
He's a VJ.
Yeah, he's a VJ. He became a journalist because he was like, well, there's a lack of them.
Right.
And I'm not saying that I became one because there's a lack of them, and I certainly don't want to equate myself to Jon Stewart. More like in the same self-effacing comedic way. Like, we both would find that idea laughable.
Can
but
I
he
even
absolutely
dare
is one.
say you might both, one might use the word nebbish to describe you both. Yes, there you go.
100%. Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah. But, you could feel that resentment, and they were just like, but what is he doing here? And
Right.
the audience was like, I know who that guy is. I've never heard of these people. And I'm like, and that's not me saying like, oh, that's why people get into comics journalism, is to be known or to be seen.
Sure.
That's actually like one of the things about journalism is like, you are the story. The story is like, you are the vessel through which the story reaches its audience, and change occurs. And I'm some jackass with a microphone who is not afraid to say stuff, for fear of not getting a job in the comic book industry. And, that's the difference. And between myself and other colleagues who might consider themselves comics journalists, I don't want to say that like it's become commodified and commercialized, but it is like that. You could probably draw the same parallel between like people going from reading comics journalism articles to getting their news from YouTubers and podcasters. It's the same way that like people went from reading newspapers to watching the news and cable news, and watching cable news become more and more niche and like tribalized.
Yeah.
It's not enough that I watch the news. I have to watch the news that agrees with my worldview. It's not enough that I read comics. I have to listen to people who agree with my opinion about comics and validate that opinion. And that's what news has become. News has become this kind of like, compartmentalized echo chamber, and has completely eroded the like weight and gravitas that news carried. I rely, if I talk about anything happening in comics presently, I rely on real journalists to do the work, and then I say what I read. I mean, like that's the job. And in no way have I ever considered myself like a newsman or a journalist to the point where I'm like, I'm getting people the message. It's more like I'm a commentator. I'm a spinner, or whatever you want to call those, the talking head. Where the news people, they do the work, and then I come in after the news program and go like, now what do they mean by that, or what did that mean for the rest of us?
Right.
If I'm in any way part of that conversation, but I can certainly speak to the erosion of comics journalism, and the sad reality of it, because I've witnessed its death, and we all have, but I was there too, and I mean, Lord knows, when I was getting my comics news, I only got it from Wizard magazine, which is not news.
No, I've been studying because I work on this project called ZCN with Chip Zdarsky, and
Yes.
And so I've been studying Wizard magazine. There's never a not a copy far from me.
Yep.
And
Same.
I look back on it, and it really is not. It's
No.
not really a news source so much as it is a hype source. I was really surprised at how much it is just a sales tool.
Yeah, it's a promo mag. I mean, like, they don't call it. It's not like Wizard, your source for comic news. There was a, what is it? Comic Shop News.
Correct. CSN. Yeah, it's still out there. Yeah.
And I would get a copy in my bag when I was a kid, and I'd open it up and go, no. I'm not reading all this. Especially as a kid, I didn't care. As a kid, I didn't read that stuff. I got a copy. Maybe if I had a confirmation bias, I'm like, oh, what's going on with the Clone Saga? I'll read that,
Yeah.
But even then, it was like, I was much more entertained by Wizard, and that's really the distinction, isn't it? It's
okay, so this actually brings up an interesting point based on what you talked about, right? So it's Wizard magazine becomes to news what what I guess at the time had been Comics Buyer's Guide, right? More of a newspaper, right? Wizard magazine becomes to the CBG, Comics Buyer's Guide, what Jon Stewart is to, say, I don't know,
like
the
Ted
CBS
Koppel.
News,
like a
Ted Koppel,
a
right?
trusted newsman on at like 10 o'clock at night. Yeah.
So I guess the extension of this question is, does comic pop, the space that you live in, is that the space of Wizard Magazine to, well, I mean, I don't know, I guess Heidi, maybe? I mean, that's, or
I would love to
ICV2, right?
Yeah,
or
I mean,
any of those sources?
yeah, I would love to be, because Wizard was absolutely a source of inspiration for me, and I know that it was a rag. I know that it was completely corporate, and I know that it fell hard, and that there are more terrible issues of Wizard than there are good. And I know that like it had a lot of misogyny and like inappropriate jokes and humor, and it was like it's a dated relic. It's a dinosaur.
Sure.
And it also was the only place that normalized comics for me. It was the only place that spoke colloquially about comics, that made jokes,
It spoke
inside
to you.
jokes, spoke to me directly as a consumer of this world that is already niche enough. I felt unwelcome in the comic book store that I bought Wizard Magazine in. You know what I mean? Like, I had no friends that read comics, and if I did, those people were weird. And and you know, the rest of them, like, I remember, and I've told the story before on mic, but let's tell it again. I remember as a kid, little kid, I go into my comic book store, which my mom hated to take me to, because she was like, I hate this hobby, I hate these people, this is a horrible thing, but I'm not going to be the person who steps on the neck of my son's interests. And so she let me go to the comic book store, and I go in there, and there was a guy, and I'm sure if he isn't dead, he's listening to podcasts, but he was referred to as the Man in Black. There was a man who I would occasionally interact with, who didn't have a name. He had like a title, like a cartoon character.
The Man in Black.
The Man in Black. And he was just a biker. Just a big biker. And he had a beard, and he wore sunglasses indoors, and he only wore black leather. And he had a hat on. Right?
This is your comics retailer?
Yeah. No. He was a customer at the comic book store. No, my comic retailer was Pat. And Pat looked like a combination of like Mike Nelson from MST3K meets Craig Kilborn. Like, he was Pat was, and he was not a good ambassador.
Not a good ambassador.
He was a guy who was like, but he was a great ambassador in a way where he was like, you do not want to be reading these things when you hit a certain age, because they will ruin your life. Like that, he was very like anti-comics in his own way. He would be considered a hater today, and he owned and ran a comic book store. Like, this is the guy who he had a comic book store from the 80s at least into the 2000s, and one day his comic book sales on eBay equaled the comic book sales in the store, so he closed the store immediately. Like, he was like, "Oh, we hit the number. Goodbye." And I remember like him closing down. I'm like, "Oh, are you closing?" He's like, "Oh, man, I'm selling comics online." I'm like, "Well, why are you closing the store?" He's like, "Because I hate people." And I'm like, "Right."
That
explains everything about who you are. But the Man in Black was this guy, and he wore boots. You know, he was a big, scary biker guy, and he was like reading, you know, like Gen 13. You know, he was just like this. But so the mystique was like gone, but also there was still this veil of like mysteriousness about him. And I remember being like, "Hey, the Man in Black, like, he's pretty cool." And my retailer was like, "No, he's not. Don't ever say that again." And I'm like, "What you mean?" He's like, "The Man in Black is not cool, and you should not want to be that. He lives with his mother. Like, that man is not cool. It's not cool to be like that at a certain age." Like, he had a lot of wisdom. But that was my experience.
That's
like,
some good shit there that your retailer was giving you,
right? But I was also like, you know, I would, but it was still a hostile experience, and so I was like, but Wizard was like non-judgmental. It was super judgmental, but like you could trick yourself into thinking, well, we're laughing at everybody else, you know, Wizard and I. But Wizard was a safe place to feel seen and to be part of the conversation in the best of terms.
Right.
I would love to be that. And I hope we are, and I think we are for a very specific amount of people. I am sad to say that, I'm going to link it to the rest of the conversation here. Like Wizard, you know, comics journalism has shifted the way that our culture has to a nicheification of interests, where it used to be you'd be on a playground and another kid would be wearing a pair of Ninja Turtle sneakers, and suddenly you have a friend for 30 years.
Right.
Because he loves Raphael and you love Donatello, so there's no stepping on toes, and you love Ninja Turtles. But now we're in a world where it's like, what era of Ninja Turtles do you like? Which turtle do you like? Well, that says everything about you, and I want to know you. Like, you can't like comic books. You have to like DC only or indie only, and there were people like that, but they were few and far between. I vividly remember them because they were very judgmental towards me, because I was like a kid who didn't know any better than to make comic books my identity.
To love more than one thing, right?
Yeah,
you can hold more than one idea in your head at a time.
I love, you're like, who are your favorite superheroes? I'm like, Spider-Man and Batman. They're like, well, that says everything about you. And I'm like, what? Then I'm like everyone else? Like, what do you want from me? But like that's where it's become. Like, it's you can't just go to a website that is like comic book news. I think there is one probably that's called that.
That URL has to be taken.
Right? It has to exist by now.
Yeah.
But comicbooknews.com, and you go there and you get your news. Like CNN or any other mainstream news source, where you go there and it's just like a frank and earnest depiction of the information. Here are here, because comic books also, they blur that line. You can't just be like a place where they talk about the industry. But also, there's another element to it that I've learned the hard way over the last many years, which is the comic book fans do not care about how the comic book industry works.
Correct.
Yeah, they just don't. And when I say that,
shouldn't.
I don't mean you, outlier, who's in the comments. I mean comic book fans. Like, people, just like if you go on any website and talk about how Spider-Man's doing, it's worse than it's ever been.
Sure.
And yet it's the #1 book at Marvel every month.
Yeah.
There's an entire audience out there who isn't even aware that people hate the book. And they're called readers, and they're buying it. But they're the same people who don't care about who has what license, or what some creator said, or what is happening to page rates. Completely couldn't care less, because why should you? I mean, realistically, if you have a hobby, it's not an obsession. It's a thing. But again, comic books are so adjacent to media, like TV and movies, and we're so movie obsessed. We don't just know the name of the movie, we know the director, and we have a real opinion about that director and the many mistakes that they've made. And so maybe we're
sure, but we don't compare and contrast what Universal did last year.
No, we don't.
We don't talk about they did this one, but they also did this one. We don't really care about that part.
Not all of us, but it gets.
There are. I'm sure there is a movie equivalent of me. Who does care, right?
Yeah.
Who is going to talk about, who is getting paid what, and what distribution models are working, and all of those things. And God bless them for it. And I will say that having just to go back to Benny's and encouraging me to not do this, I will say that we just got back from C2E2, where I did a day of programming just about this, super nichey, super nerdy, in the weeds, and that panel room was full every day, all day.
Nice.
I was shocked that there were that many people who cared about the past, present, and future of comics distribution. That was the title of the panel.
Wow.
But again, it goes to how nichey people things have become, right? We get into it, and that's the thing that we're most passionate about, and that's okay, right? Because we don't pay attention to everything else.
That's right.
But I agree with you to a point. What I love about it is what you're doing doesn't have to be the same thing that I'm doing, and that we can both coexist. And but for me, I don't need traffic. You are becoming more what you're talking about, is that broader audience that just loves to consume comics and talk about the stories themselves.
Yeah, but I also believe that one can impart with, and it could be just the teacher in me, but one can, they've unfortunately named it. It's called edutainment.
Yeah.
But one can inform and entertain at the same time. And it's just about knowing your business and speaking intelligently, but weaving it in with the conversation. And it's like, we can talk about like whether Colossus's poop is metal, but also we need to talk about like, you know, and it's the same problem that I faced when I was in a classroom. Like, I remember when Mary Jane being Venom, for example. Spoilers.
Right.
But, you know, Mary Jane's Venom right now. And I was like, this is so emblematic of a deep problem creatively with Marvel Comics. And, you know, here's why. And there is always going to be a third of the audience that goes, it isn't that deep. And they're the same people who were in the classroom when you're talking about To Kill a Mockingbird or any book, more specifically something like The Scarlet Letter, where it's like, it's not that deep.
I remember.
like, oh.
I actually remember that conversation around. Oh gosh, what's the story about the kids that are on the island and they?
Lord of the Flies.
Lord of the Flies, right? I remember
Yeah.
actually having that exact conversation in a classroom about Lord of the Flies, right? Yeah.
Right. It's like it's not that deep. It's about a bunch of kids, and I'm like, if that were the case, wouldn't that be boring as hell?
Yeah.
If everything was just whatever the surface level was, like, don't you have any intellectual curiosity at all? Like, don't you when in Superman Returns, and it's clunky and lame, and I hate it. But when he like falls, like the stigmata, don't you think that elicits an image? You know, don't you think it's curious and born again? The first page that depicts Matthew in every single issue is another stage of Jesus's life. Like, don't you think there's something specific about that might be something that's the creator's trying to say, you know?
Yeah.
And I know that like I genuinely think some people are concerned that if they find a deeper meaning, it will ruin the experience of reading it, you know, or viewing it or whatever the hell media they're consuming. Where it's like, now you're going to make me start thinking about it and whether I like it or not. And I'm like, yeah, and then you will go through change and growth. And it's okay to be critical of the thing that you loved or love currently. Like, as long as it's not your loved one, you know, like, it's
interesting too. I will say that I've seen this happen it happened to me. Yeah. And I go through periods where it's a little more debilitating than others, but I know that it happens to a lot of other people. About when you spend all day thinking about story and thinking about narrative, the last thing you want when you relax is someone else's story and narrative, because it just falls short, right? You're like, oh, I can see the weaknesses. Oh, I know exactly where this is going, and you're telling your family that guy did it. You know, or, you know, this guy you love, he's going to die at some point. I don't know why, but they're just setting him up because you know he's going to die.
Right.
You know, and it takes away that mystique. And so as a result, like, I think like, you know, Alfred Hitchcock famously was just a history buff, and that was all he did. Was he like, I don't know, it was something really obscure, like he loved like the history of trains or something. That's all he consumed. That's all he read about. So it's you can't, at some point it just becomes enough narrative.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I can't think of it all the time. Like, I can't eat, breathe and like drink story. It'll make me go crazy, you know? And plus I want to enjoy something. And it's like, it's okay. But like, that's why I'm always like frustrated when I'm beset by like, you know, angry or frustrated viewers who are like, boo, stop talking about the deeper meaning, or stop subjecting me to creator interviews. I just want to, you know, hear about your opinion of a thing, or I just want to know what happened in a story. And I'm like,
subjecting me to
I understand, like, but like, A, it's voluntary, and B, there's a million options. Like,
just don't watch this episode.
Right. Like,
you know how deep my backlist is? Just don't watch this one.
Just don't watch this one. It's like, yeah, but like, I'm obsessive. And it's like, I understand that, but that's not my problem. You know? and also, like, it's not, and I hate to say, like, eat your vegetables, but like, don't you, like, I get, maybe it's an age thing, or maybe, I don't know, because, you know, I remember seeing a comedian once saying something like, education or like school is wasted on kids. Like, can you imagine being like 38 and someone tells you like, oh, you can't have a job anymore. You have to go to a building surrounded by your peers where all you do all day is go into rooms with an expert in them and learn stuff. Like, that sounds like a joy. That sounds awesome. Yeah. Are you kidding me? And like, sometimes, by the way, and there's always going to be like some downtime, and there's going to be a set designated time where you can just run around like an animal and eat food, and
there's gonna be somebody who makes you lunch,
right,
and then there's gonna be like a nap,
right. Right. Yeah. I was thinking high school, but yeah, even middle school where it's like you get to paint. Like you're going to be forced to you have to make a bird box. Like that sounds awesome.
I want you to spend an hour a day. Forced hour a day.
Right.
I want you to learn to play an instrument.
Yes.
Like,
are you kidding me? Like you mean but like in a year I'll be great at it. It's like, yeah, that's the idea. Hey, oh by the way, at least 3 times a week you have to exercise. That sounds like a dream. And kids
you gotta go outside and you gotta play a game. You gotta go outside and play a game with your friends.
Literally bury me in the ground. I would rather be strung up by my ankles than go to this place and subject myself to this experience. And I'm
you know what? I have to say I hated school. I don't know why.
Too.
I just didn't. But man, the way you're pitching it,
School sounds pretty dope for adults.
It sounds amazing.
So all right, so we'll just switch it around. All right, the kids, they can go to work. They all want to anyway.
Just go straight to the factory.
Get in the factory in the fields and use those little bodies.
That's right. You have all this energy. Work. Make me a fucking iPhone. Come on.
And I'll see you at home for dinner.
That's right.
Right?
That you're going to make because I'm so tired from having learned all day.
Yeah, because I'm just, I spent so much time just learning and expanding my mind.
Oh my God.
So maybe
I
it's
want
just
to talk
kids.
about now. Let's bring us up to the present. We've covered a lot of the past, and honestly, we're going to run out of time. I don't want to miss talking about the fact that you have come full circle, right? You began wanting to tell stories. You began getting the juice of making comics.
Yeah.
And here you are, Mr. Terminator.
Yeah, Mr. Terminator. I wrote the backup to a Terminator book for 5 issues, 2 pages at a time.
Listen,
but I did get to write a book. I can. It's not just I got to write a book. It's not like I got to do a backup in some obscure, far away thing. No, I got to write the backup to a Terminator book. I love Terminator. This is not one of those things where I had to pretend, because I had to do the whole tour, which is something really weird for me, where I got to be on other people's podcasts and go I love Terminator and I bleed oil and I got to sell the book. But what an easy freaking job that was, because I do love Terminator. This is a dream come true. I actively pursued it. I called publishers and I'm like, who has the Terminator license right now? Do you have the Terminator license? Do you have the Terminator license? Do you? And they're like, I don't know. And what's funny is each publisher, like Dark Horse and IDW, going, hey, do we have a Terminator license? I don't know. We should find out. So maybe I started a bidding war by accident, but Dynamite had the license and they were like, we're in, and they were like, well, we can work something out. And I sent them all my self-published books and they were like, okay, dude can write in English and story structure, let's go. And I negotiated my way from 8 pages to 10 pages, and I got to tell a 10-page story with virtually no dialogue whatsoever. And that was self-imposed. I just didn't want to get verbose. I didn't want it to be really self-indulgent. I've read comics, and I know first time you read the first Kevin Smith book, and it's just look at all these word balloons, and it's yeah, I get it. He probably wrote a film script, and then he just wrote how many panels there were, and so I wanted to fall out of that trap and go no, just let's let Colin just go for it. Colin will more or less be the storyteller. I'm just gonna say where it's going, and I'm glad I did, because that book looks great. Those 10 pages look fire. But thank you. Yeah, and I got to tell that story, and I got to live in Terminator. And if I never do anything else, which is probably more likely, I will always have done it. And and I'll have those copies in my office, and I can look at them and go hey, look at that.
I love that.
I did it. And that was just just something I actively pursued, and I'm glad I got to do it. And I appreciate the the shout out to that. What a wonderful experience that was. And what's more, people were really nice about it. It wasn't failed comic book writer makes YouTube videos instead and then finally gets to do it, so he abandons the thing that we thought he liked. I love doing this. I do YouTube for a living. I love it.
Yeah.
Every day I get a comment suggesting that I die. So I better love it, or, it would be really disheartening. But I do love that, but I got to do this too. And it was a supplement, and it was fun, and I'm joyful and
that's
proud.
the juice, man.
Yeah,
that is wonderful. I'm
great.
So happy for you.
Oh, but I appreciate the audience being cool about it too. They weren't Like, what a phony. It was just like they were happy for me, and I was like, thank you,
Yeah.
like thank you for being so kind.
You know, this whole YouTube thing was obviously just a ploy to get you to a place where you could write comic books.
That's right. Like, I'm like, what a long freaking journey it's been. 11 years of doing this, but I did it. I figured it out.
This is the long con, baby. It's time to close.
Right, exactly. Like that would be pretty lame. You know, my wife would be pretty disappointed in me if I was like,
do you know how hard it is to get YouTube videos when you're a comics creator? I got my own platform. Now it's time.
Yes, now it's time for me to throw it away in favor of writing Terminator backups. No. Thankfully, no one's really accused me of that. I've seen that accusation hurled before, which is why I was very sensitive to it. But I was surprised to see that, like, if there was negative criticism, it wasn't in my bubble. You know, I'm sure it was somewhere, but like I didn't see it, and I'm like, good, keep it there. I don't.
Thank God. We're coming into kind of a close here. I ask this a question a lot, and I feel like I'm going to have a decent opinion, if not a full-on rant. What do you think is the biggest risk facing comics as, you know, as a hobby, comics as a medium, maybe comic shops? What do you think? What do you see as the thing on the horizon that could just pop the bubble?
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't think about that very much. I'm usually the one saying like, it's not all on fire. Like, you know, the comic book industry is not dead, regardless of the fact that it's been dead for what, like the last 50 years?
Regardless of the fact that you cannot type in the words comic book industry
without saying
in YouTube or any of those algorithmic like autofills without it saying are dead or is dying. Yeah.
Right. I don't know, man.
That's how you get traffic, by the way. I don't know why you're not making that video every week, because apparently that's
the
only thing that gets it.
Like I try really hard not to be like. I think that the reason we have such a like amazing audience is because like I don't want to say like we're an authentic channel, but we are. And like, you know, if you meet me, I'm gonna talk like this is me right now, and it's me when we're like at, you know, whatever that whiskey bar was called. I don't remember anymore.
In San Diego, yeah. I think it's actually called the whiskey. I don't remember. Yeah, but I know
exactly what you're talking about, though. Yeah. Benny and I got a Scotch egg there. He was so obsessed with Scotch eggs.
That's right. It was a good one.
Like, oh, we'll get a Scotch. They made a great one. We had like a lot of them. The last time we went, like he was like, "We're gonna get Scotch egg," and then he was like, "Well, this worked," and I guess that was part of it. He was like, "Well, this worked, so we're gonna do this," and so we just got. He's like, "We'll get another one," and I'm like, "All right." These are hard to make. But yeah, I mean, my concern for the comic book industry lies in its like losing preciousness about it. You know, like one of my main concerns is not necessarily about like the comic book industry overall, but it might factor into it. Is that like everyone who knows how the industry works gets fired and replaced by a corporate stooge from a studio. Like that, my real concern is like Marvel Comics effing up so hard that Disney shows up and goes, "You're fired, you're fired, you're fired, you're fired, you're fired. Here are all my cousins and nephews and stupid assholes who work under the Disney umbrella, and they're going to run this industry into the ground because they don't know how it works. Then we're going to fix it. We're going to figure this out. And they're just going to make it trash." And because that's what they do. Like that, Disney as a company does that. They're like, "Oh, you have a video game company? We're going to buy it and replace all of you with our own staffers. And the video game industry is now like worse as a result. Your company is closed, moving on, because we never cared in the first place." Like, I'm always worried that Marvel will turn into that. It will turn into just some stupid bullshit from Disney.
It's interesting, yeah. Although, you know, the staffing of Marvel has always been that kind of 80-20 law. Yeah. Like 20% of them are there forever.
Right.
But the other 80% are just interchangeable.
Exactly.
But that 20%, man, they're going to die in those chairs.
I know.
You know what I mean?
I've heard. And, you know, and that's a problem too. You know, it's a problem where there's like, you know, not to get political, but like term limits are important in every respect. Especially in the comic book industry. It's like sometimes it's time to go, but like not at the expense of the industry. You know, like I don't love the idea of like elder statesmen who know how the industry works leaving it behind and leaving it to people who aren't precious about it.
Yeah, and I will say that I think that we're in a decent time right now. I know I've gotten I had the pleasure of getting to know a lot of people at Marvel and a lot of people at DC, and I've always known a lot of people in the kind of indie press. I will say we're in a really special time where the people who are in power generally everywhere have a genuine love for what we do.
Yeah.
Right. They have a genuine interest, and they are invested in making it work. And I think that's part of why it's working right this second. So,
yeah, I mean, definitely. You can see that people do care, and they are working hard. I mean, like, you don't greenlight a book like Martian Manhunter and call him the Martian Mindfucker without like going, we're trying something special here.
Exactly.
This is not just like a stunt. It's comics. It's good comics.
I really hate to do this because I know that because it's a good time, and maybe we should definitely start thinking about when round 2 comes around. But I know I know I have a hard out, and I think I know that you have a lot going on. But is there anything we didn't cover that you like thought, well, I'm going on this show, it's time to start boning up on, like anything you want to talk about?
No. I'm happy with the I was surprised we didn't talk too much about like the direction of the comic book industry overall, but I'm not disappointed. I'm just like, I was more inclined to talk about the journalism aspect because that was such an intriguing subject, and it's just like it's an interesting question overall, and I wish we had a solution. That's really like at the end of the day, I want to say like there is no solution to the problem that is available now without, because I don't see a solution. Doesn't mean there isn't one.
Sure.
I feel like because there's no money in it, comics journalism will continue to be a hobby as opposed to it being a business.
Yeah.
Of course, making news into business sucks and hurts news, but it's also how news gets there. And so one has to make some kind of an allotment or sacrifice. My question is how, and what do you do to facilitate like a successful comics journalism? And I think the problem is A, the audience ain't interested, and B, the money ain't there. That's a 1-2 punch knockout. That's it. Like if the audience doesn't give a shit about how the industry functions, or learn or enough to learn how it functions, then you've already lost the fight. And that's my problem.
But again, I think that I'm seeing, at least in our success with this channel and the success that we're seeing with some of the programming, live event programming, and like the fact that so many people are interested in, like, say, ZCN that we're doing. I'm seeing, at least in my own tiny little microcosm, I'm beginning to see that interest that hopefully we can fan into a flame.
Yes.
But I will counter to say that I was talking to someone very high up in the industry late last year. It was right before I took on the ZCN project. And one of the things that he said that really got me thinking, and it's part of the reason why I took it on, was he said, nobody is selling comics. When we had Wizard Magazine, they were selling comics. Now everybody just wants to talk about industry bullshit. We have nobody selling comics. And if I was having that conversation with him today, I would counter it with, yeah, they are. They're just comic pop, right? They're on YouTube. They're where people are. And I think that you guys are doing that. And I'm so glad you are. And I'm glad you're continuing to do that.
Thank you, sir.
Where can people find you for that encouragement to go buy some fucking comics?
Right. Well, I mean, if you want to check out our main source of entertainment, that's Comic Pop, youtube.com/Comic Pop. But we also have a second channel, and that is really where we get into the nitty gritty and the meat and potatoes about the industry and about selling comics every week on our Monday show, Off the Rack, and that's youtube.com/Comic Pop Returns, because titles don't matter. And so we went with that. But yeah, that's our podcast channel. And that's where you'll find like me talking with Joshua Williamson every month, where my wife and I chat about comics every week, and where we just get into kind of like the stuff that isn't quite like sexy enough for prime time.
Right. Cool. I'm into it. I'm subscribing.
Thanks,
excellent. All right. Thank you, Sal, so much for coming on. It's
my pleasure.
It's been a joy. And, we rarely have this without having stakes. So,
I know. I feel a little hungry myself. I agree. But I look forward to seeing you again, man. Hopefully the next con.
Absolutely. Once again, my name is Adam Freeman. This has been Comic Industry Insiders. And, seriously, though, why have you not liked and subscribed? I know we just said subscribers are bullshit, but it could help. So thank you so much for sticking with us. We'll see you again next week. And namaste, y'all.
This message is brought to you by the Prana Bullet. What is the Prana Bullet? I'm glad you asked. It's a weekly newsletter dropped in your inbox every Friday. It's designed to keep you up to speed on that week in the comics industry, and our goal is to keep it light, to keep it informative, and I swear to you, we're going to keep it easy to skim. Each week, we're always looking for new things to learn about our comics industry and the changing landscape that it is, and this is the one place where you can catch up on everything you might have missed. Plus, the monthly Prana bestseller list is going to drop here first. If that sounds like the news you need, head over to pranadm.com and sign up today. That's PRANADM.com and sign up. And if you do, I'll see you this Friday.